Hey, welcome everyone. In this video, I'm going over options on how to back up your data over a network, like your home network, or over the internet. So basically some sort of connectivity option. So if you want to see the written version of this video, you can find a link to my website in the video description. So the objective of this video is to accomplish two things at the same time. One is where should you put your money into one of these services, and also learn about all the good and bad of each service as well. So you're learning and maybe making a cost conscientious decision. That's really hard to say about where to put your money. Because the mindset nowadays is a very bad one. Just do everything in the cloud. You know, these multi-billion dollar, multi-trillion dollar companies are saying it's the best option. I should do it. We're going to be looking at this, and the cloud, in my opinion, for me and a lot of people, is the worst option. Okay, but I'll explain why. There are some goods to it, and I'll explain. And so I have this chart along with a number of items we've been going over, and also I'll be kind of putting this chart in a kind of a legend. So I'm going to keep this up here. Green check means it's good. It's just like, this is awesome. A green circle means it's just okay. It's a considerable thing of note. A green line means it's neutral. It's just okay, or it's hard to define. It probably depends on the circumstance. A red line across is just like, it might not be right for you, but it's not terrible either. It's still, maybe you want to consider it. And an X is just a flat out bad feature in one of these items. Okay, so I filled in the chart, but before that, we need to actually understand what we're talking about here. Cloud services, we're not talking about enterprise grade for any of these, okay? We're talking about just regular consumer, just a regular person trying to understand technology, okay? I'll make that very clear here. And in an enterprise situation, this whole thing is completely, well, most of the chart is changed in the criteria. Cloud services is anything hosted by a third-party provider. So this could be Apple iCloud, Google Drive from Google, OneDrive from Microsoft. You kind of get the idea. NAS, which stands for Network Attached Storage, is kind of like a box you can put multiple drives into it. And how you can configure the drives is up to you. There's different options depending on the software capability of the NAS. The amount of drives you can put in also varies. Some are rather complicated to use, some are rather easy. Most of them nowadays are trying to make the software really easy and user-friendly to use, but we'll cover that shortly. And also another thing about NAS that's interesting is that some of them have become so powerful, they're like mini computers, but specifically designed for network storage, but some other cool, funky features available, which we'll discuss when I erase the chart and go to the next section. Router, I put in here because this is inspired by the previous video I just made, in which I explained how to make your ASUS router, because I have ASUS router, so I made it on that, into kind of like a makeshift NAS, because it has USB ports on the back of a lot of ASUS routers. You can turn that into a network attached storage device, even though technically it's a router. And you can access that data from within your own home, outside on the public internet, if you're like a cafe or something. And same with a NAS, you can access that from anywhere in the world if you set it up correctly. So I said it initially that I'm not a fan of the cloud, and you'll notice there's gonna be a lot of green check marks for the cloud. But the X's and items that are not in their favor are so huge. There's such a massive red flag for me. That's why I don't choose cloud. So I just want to point that out there based on my personal opinion, as well as the opinion of others. But some people might not care about that. So ease of setup. Cloud is by far the easiest. There's not much configuration to do. You set up an account, pretty much it. NAS, it depends. You do have to buy it. You kind of have to set up the drives. You have to understand that I need to purchase drives. A lot of them have to purchase them separately and put it in. That's pretty straightforward, and most computer shops will tell you how to do it. They'll just be like, hey, here's the drives I recommend, here's a NAS, you go home, put it together, and that's it. And again, they have software built into them. When you connect to the computer, it tells you how to do it. It's super simple nowadays. So not as good as cloud, but it gets a green circle where it's still okay. Router, I kind of give it a neutral line because it does require some tinkering and whatnot. The reason I just said it was just okay, it's not too bad, is because there's videos on the internet explaining how to do it for your specific model. I did it for ASUS routers. I'm sure other people have done it for TP-Link, Netgear. Data ownership, big no-no to me. You do not own your data, okay? I don't care what anyone says. The second you upload it to the cloud, you do not own it. Yes, you're the one that's gonna access the data, you can modify it, but I made a video about this explaining in a separate video, I'll put a link to in the video description, where services like AWS, Google Drive have deleted permanent data, sometimes for regular consumers and sometimes for enterprise customers. Data wiped off the face of the planet and they cannot restore it. You don't own the servers, you don't own the firewalls, you don't own anything when it comes to the data that's housed there. They can do whatever they want with it. NAS, you 100% own your data. This NAS will most likely, again, this is for consumers, sitting in your house, maybe in the basement or something. The same with the ASUS router, sitting in your home, you have full control over this data. Cost. I put an X here. This is probably where people most argue with me. The problem with cost is if you go to any cloud storage service provider or any subscription model, even like watching Netflix, Spotify, they will never tell you how much the cost adds up to like 3 years of service, 5 years of service. Notice that a lot of them say, hey, this is how much it costs you per year. But hey, if you bundle with a 2-year plan, you get like a 40% discount. And this is how much you're paying per month. The numbers look small, but they never have a calculator saying, hey, how much are you going to pay after 5 years? It's a marketing, trick. Cost adds up fast after 1 year, 2, 3, 4, or 5 years, and they could change the pricing at any time. Okay, unless you sign an agreement. Like I have Microsoft Office 365 plan, personal one, or I used to. The cost has stayed the same for the longest time, and all of a sudden it spiked up because Microsoft's like, hey, we need to pay for cost for AI Copilot in your 365 subscription. I don't want AI, but they're forcing me to increase my cost going forward. NAS I put as just okay because the upfront cost, but it's expensive. Like here in Canada, it can cost a few $100 depending on the drive and the quality of the NAS, how many drives you need to purchase. This can get rather expensive, but I put it as just okay because at least you know what you're paying upfront. Router I put as great. Everyone has a router almost nowadays. The only caveat catch here is that most people use their router that comes from their ISP. ISP stands for Internet Service Provider. It's usually a modem and router 2-in-1. I tell every single person I know, the reason your network sucks is because you're using a 2-in-1 modem and router. 100% of the time, that's usually the problem. I always end up buying my own router and plug it into the modem, and that becomes the main router. I disable the router capability in my modem. Works wonders. So will you have to pay a cost? It depends, but because routers are so cheap nowadays with this capability of a USB plugin, I put it as the best option for cost model. Scalability, what that basically means in the world of IT is how quickly can you scale up or down the storage in this particular topic? How can you manage resources, the digital resources? If you don't have enough storage, you can add more, pay more. Like Google Drive, you can pay more for more storage. A few adjustments in your account is done within like a minute or two. Very easy. NAS is just okay. Again, you can absolutely increase the storage. You can buy new drives. The caveat is the cost, right? And depending on how you set it up, if you have a RAID configuration where the data is not replicated, you have to be careful because when you take one drive out, some of the data might go away with it. So you have to be careful in replicating data. Scalability on the router is okay, slightly better than a NAS because there's not as much configuration to be done. It's usually one USB stick or one external drive plugged in. You can copy that data to another external drive connected to your computer over the network. So compute power is phenomenal in the cloud. They're running dedicated servers, they're managing the storage. If there's ever slowdown, it's usually the internet, not the actual hardware powering the storage itself. NAS nowadays, very powerful. As I mentioned, they're kind of like mini computers set up as to look like an external drive. Router is absolutely abysmal. The reason being is because your router is designed to be that, a router. It's a network device first and foremost. It has to go through a lot of devices. If you have smart home devices, tablets, phones, smart TVs, this and that, you could have like a few dozen devices connected and not realize until you look at your router settings. It has to process all that traffic at the same time if they're all active. It puts a strain on the CPU and the RAM in the router. Yes, routers have CPU and RAM nowadays. They're like mini computers also. Everyone's like watching smart TV. They're on their cell phone at the same time while watching a smart TV, and a lot of network usage. And you're trying to copy and move data around on a USB drive on the router. It could be super slow because the router literally cannot process that much data. Maintenance. There's absolutely no maintenance with the cloud. That should be part of basic agreement in terms of service that the cloud does everything for you. NAS I put as okay, it's not perfect, it's not as good as the cloud, but it's pretty good. Same with the router because you usually only have to do one firmware update. So hey, your NAS has a new firmware update this month. Update it when no one's using the network drives, done. Same with the router. Hardware issues, again, everything is maintained by the cloud service provider and they have redundant systems. They have many systems available. NAS, it depends on how you set up your RAID configuration if you have RAID. If you have the data mirrored on multiple drives, no problem. If one drive dies, you're good. If you have it set up in where there's data partitioned across, so let's say if a movie file is 10 gigs and the data is segmented across, depending on which RAID configuration you have, and one drive dies, some of the data of the movie, the 10 gig movie, is corrupted now, it's gone. Why do people do that? It's because of greater speed. That's a topic for a different video, but that can happen. So that's why it kind of is like, it's okay, but it really depends on how you set it up. USB on a router, Once that drive is done or the router is dead, it's all kaput. Network speed for the cloud is absolutely phenomenal. They usually have some of the best network connection speeds in the world, depending on the service provider, of course. NAS, again, it depends. If you're on your home network, on the same network as your NAS, it'll be lightning speed. Better than it would be you connect to a cloud because on your home network. But if you're, like, say, here I'm in Canada and my NAS is here and I travel to the UK and get the data, it depends on two things. How fast is my network speed at home? So some people are like, I have fiber, 1 gigabits per second. Okay, but if the latency is really horrible because you're physically so far away and it takes a while for the data to signal to go across the sea, when I'm in the UK and my NAS is here, you can lose packets of data and the data transfer could just fail. Everyone overlooks latency. That same caveat applies to router USB. Okay, so now we're talking about the last set. One is security. So this is security in terms of how protected the data is. I'm not talking about it being in a data center, it's locked behind barbed wire, this and this and that. I'm talking about the actual digital security. Cloud is some of the best in the industry. It's very rare to hear about some sort of security breach on a cloud service provider. NAS is pretty darn good. Again, you don't hear about this very often. Usually their security is top notch because if this fails, the industry, like that company could flop big time. People just avoid them because like if my data is not secure, then they could lose their entire business. Routers, not the best security. They do have some layer of encryption. You can use like TLS on the FTP, which I use for the Asus router setup video, but it's not the best, not SFTP. It could be better. Privacy, absolutely abysmal for cloud service providers because a majority of them, first and foremost, will use AI services to scan your data now. Google Drive and OneDrive from Microsoft are heavily using AI to scan all your data, and they must sell that data. And even if you try to say, oh, someone like iCloud is very privacy-based, Apple is, that's a lie. I made a video called De-Meta Your Life Now, in which I did explain how Meta is a truly evil company. It's like a 27-minute video. I did a lot of research. And in there, I explained from a reputable news source, I think it was New York Times, where Apple was caught collecting people's chat data from Meta and using it as marketing purposes. So when Tim Cook and the executives always say Apple's all about privacy and security, that's a lie. NAS and router, fantastic. Once you have the permissions set, you control who can have access to that data. Availability is focusing on the hardware side. How is the network connection of where the data is being stored? So when you're in the cloud service data center, your home, for example, is there power backups available? Cloud is usually phenomenal. They're usually housed in data centers with multiple servers, multiple power backups, this and that. I put NAS as okay because chances of power going out in your house is pretty slim. And in the worst case scenario, a lot of NAS have the option to disconnect directly with a USB device at the back. So you can connect your computer directly to the NAS if your internet were to go down, for example. Router, I gave it a flat out X because it has almost no redundancy in place. Once your router is done, it's done. Data redundancy. So this is like if the data were to, magically disappear off one server or one storage drive, is it still available? Yeah, usually with cloud service providers, they have multiple servers on multiple racks backing up your data, at least twice minimum. NAS, it really depends. Did you set up your RAID configuration to mirror your data on 2 drives or 3 or 4 drives? If one drive dies, who cares? It's backed up. But if you have an array configuration where the data is spread across, evenly distributed, segments of data, and one drive dies, your data be corrupted. So it's good for the most part. It's rare to hear people making that mistake, but something to keep in mind. Again, once the USB drive on your router is dead, it's done. Data restoration. How easy is it to restore data? I put this as a red line, but it's not right because I made an entire video dedicated to this, that when the cloud service provider, if they lose your data, it's gone. And they do not care about restoring it if they were the ones to make the mistake. I made a whole video explaining this. Again, link is in the description. So you are trusting someone else with your data. You are paying a fee and they're supposed to commit to it, but it doesn't mean it's guaranteed. Things happen in life. With NAS, again, how did you back up your data? Was it mirrored or not? And this and this and that. Also, in addition, do you have another backup in place somewhere else? I have multiple backups. I have one set of backups in my house and another exact replicated data in my in-laws' house. If there's ever a fire at my current house or a flood or something, it's backed up. Router, I put a green line because it doesn't have multiple backup options on the same device. But if you have this data on the USB stick backed up to your computer and the router, USB stick, or hard drive dies, do you really care? You can back it up from your computer again. Connection options. This is how many options do you have to connect into the service and access the data. It's pretty good for cloud, but in some cases, the mobile website sucks, right? But usually you have apps available. The desktop website works out pretty good for most of them. I noticed that Microsoft OneDrive is very janky, man. It's just, sometimes it just really just goes buck wild on me sometimes. And Google Drive will do that here and there once in a while. So for the most part, it's pretty good. NAS seems to have the most options. You can connect through a website, you can connect through apps. They really have it so the better NAS companies, not the cheap ones, like the better ones will try to make it versatile so you can access your data anytime, any point. And because you're not relying on a third-party website to load the data if you're accessing the website, it's directly to your system, it's usually pretty stable. Routers have some of the worst options. You'll be lucky if it has app compatibility. You'll be lucky if you can use it on a website at not losing the expense of security. And you usually have to use an FTP, I guess, at least in the ASUS situation, so pretty bad there. User permissions. This one is kind of a line across. If there was an enterprise level, this would get a green check because enterprise user permissions are very granular. They have to be. But in the world of personal data, it's not that great. So you can dedicate folders and share that one folder. But if you want to share one, you have your top level here, you want to share the folder here, and then another subfolder here. Like you can't do that granularity in a consumer. So that's why I didn't get a good one. In NAS, you can do that. You can usually do that through the software of the NAS, or you can do it through the software of your operating system. So if you have Windows permissions applied to your NAS, for example, you can get very granular if you know what you're doing, but it does require some work. And USB permissions, it can be done. I'm not saying it's absolutely terrible, it's not an X, but they're pretty horrible. It's very difficult to assign permissions the way you would want to. Media server. Cloud storage options are absolutely abysmal as a media server. You want to connect it to your Plex, for example, absolute dog garbage. NAS is by far the best, like hands down. There's like no competition I can really think of unless you have like your computer is your server. Routers are just garbage, right? They just can't handle like much computing power. They're just not designed for this. Exit cost. Exit cost means how much would it cost to drop one of these services? Cloud is horrible. You're usually locked in some sort of commitment. Usually a year, 2 years. It's very rare to get monthly, and if monthly, you're not going to sign up for it because it's super expensive. So once you're in there, you're stuck. My personal 365 account, I'm locked in until April. Nothing I can do about it. So I've stopped using it, but I'm stuck. NAS and routers, the day you want to stop using it, just do it. Just unplug the power, you're done. Vulnerability management I put up here, even though it's pretty good across the board, is how good is it at managing vulnerabilities? Cloud service providers do everything for you. NAS and routers, you have to do that yourself. When it comes to updating the firmware of them, do you have any vulnerabilities on the computer itself? Usually not installing software on any of these. It's just meant for storing data. Monitoring for antivirus, malware. Again, your computer will do that whenever it scans. Sometimes they might be built in here. I know some super expensive routers have that capability here. And API integration. So if you want to integrate it with some sort of smart home system that you have housed in your house or whatever, or some sort of third-party system, integrating with like API integration, you can even count as Plex. You're not messing with the code in the API, but does it natively support it? So we're going beyond it encompasses media server and so much more, basically. Cloud at the consumer level is abysmal. At the enterprise level, yeah, because you have a lot of software companies that use cloud storage and they have to get that accomplished, but consumer, no. NAS is by far the best. They're usually compatible with a lot of smart home products. You can stream content through Kodi, Plex. You can stream music to third-party apps on your computer, what have you. It's really good for that. Router is just absolutely not. So super long video. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you learned something. And not only did you learn something, but you make a cost-conscientious decision. Again, hard to say. That the cloud is being marketed by multi-billion-dollar and multi-trillion-dollar companies like Microsoft, that you have to get the cloud. It's super easy. There's nothing to it. Yeah, that you lose your privacy and a ton of money over the years. So that's pretty much it. Hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to check out my website. The link is in the video description. Hit the like button, subscribe. It literally helps my channel grow. And there's also like a super thanks button. It's like a heart icon just below this video. Maybe you want to click on that because I have to make these videos after hours when I'm not at work. And yeah, thanks for watching.